Good evening, fellow Plexers. I've never done this before, never really showed a post on Facebook, but I want to give some advice to Ben that I think he might find workable because what he wants to do isn't possible. So he just purchased a new 1821 Plus. Congratulations. I'm waiting for the fabled 1825 Plus to be released to buy that to then replace my DS 1520 Plus for all my Plex media and my trash guide containers. Then I'll shift the DS 1520 Plus into place where the DS 1019 Plus is now as a full backup setup using Hyper Backup. So a Hyper Backup is not a clone. If my main NAS went down, I'd buy a replacement, buy new drives, and restore everything through Hyper Backup. So it's not a second copy, and I'm not suggesting that for you. So, anyone watching, what Ben wants to do is he wants to have the new NAS set up to sync automatically with the old one, so he has a duplicate set of his Plex media collection on it. And then he wants Plex to be able to fall back to the second NAS in case the first one goes offline. And Ben, unfortunately, Plex does not have that capability whatsoever. There's no redundancy of servers. You can have a Plex server on each, but they're separate servers, and you can invite all your friends to that second server and just tell them it's a backup server. Now, for that to work, let me bring the web app in. All your users, if they've been invited to your server as their own user account, will have to go to account settings and then drop down and enable sync my watch state and ratings. This will sync whatever they've watched across multiple Plex accounts. So you basically invite them to both servers. That's the absolute easiest. But I'm going to suggest something else. So I'm set up with all my media and my trash guide containers on this NAS. And you didn't really ask for this advice, but here's my shared media folder. Your acquisition folder for the trash guides must be in that same shared folder. That's the only way to enable atomic moves, and I'll refer you to the trash guides for further information on that, where they used to tell you, I don't know if they still do, but they used to tell you that most container guides out there do not have path examples that enable atomic moves, which is why they have their own suggested structure with everything in one shared folder that I think they call data. Well, I'm just calling it Plex here. So I have a sort folder for each library type. So like inside this simply named movie sort folder are the actual library folders that different Plex movie libraries point to. So the acquisition folder has to be in that same shared media folder. And then here's the complete folder that my Sonar instance and LiDAR instance monitor. And if I use radar, it would monitor that folder also. So if you're not set up like that on your old NAS, it's worth revamping everything and just moving to the new NAS to get all that set up properly to achieve atomic moves. But again, that's a separate discussion. So, main media here, I use Hyper Backup to back that shared media folder up to this NAS, and everything goes in this folder, and I'd have to restore it. I couldn't just use this. There are no files here besides the huge backup file. I do run a test. I do run 2 test Plex media servers on this NAS, but only one can be active at a time. Currently, the Docker container is active. So the trick is to move the Plex server off the NAS onto a mini computer like a little fast NUC with a great iGPU by running unraid as only a Docker host setup. So the easy thing to do is to mount your shared Plex media folder, which I do here. I also run channels DVR on this little unraid NUC, and the recordings go back to my Synology NAS to this shared folder. And this is just an example I was using for something else. So what you could do is you could mount your shared media folder from both the old and the new NAS to have them already set up here. And then if your main server goes down, I can guarantee you, with only spending 3 or 4 minutes in unraid, all you have to do is stop the container. And I think I've got somebody streaming. No, I don't have a stream going. All you have to do is stop the container like this, but I'm not going to stop it, and then edit it, and then go in and change your paths to reference the same folders on the other NAS. So this takes no time at all, and then you save your changes, spin the container back up, and now this disassociated Plex server on fast hardware that enables really great hardware accelerated transcoding, you've just switched to the other server and pointing at the duplicate media, and you're back up and running to then repair the first Synology NAS or replace it or whatever you have to do. Oh, and while we're here, added protection would be going to apps and installing the app data backup for unraid. What this does is, on a schedule that you set, it will shut all your containers down. At 3 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, all my containers shut down, and they all get backed up by that app data backup along with all my unraid boot files. And if you didn't know, all the container configuration files are also backed up to your unraid USB boot drive. So if this container gets nuked here, the structure for the container is still on this cache pool in the app data folder. So if I go into Plex, this is the same Plex Media Server folder structure that you have on your Synology NAS, whether Plex is running as a package or an application folder. So you can easily move your Plex container to unraid without losing any metadata. And this structure gets backed up by the app data backup plugin, but the container configuration, how it's set, gets backed up to the flash drive, which then again is backed up by the app data app. And I have my backups use this mount to throw the backups right back onto my Synology NAS in a folder in my shared media folder, which you would have synced to your other NAS, so you'd have that backup there too. This unraid container backup keeps the last 3 backups. Every Wednesday, this gets backed up, and the oldest one gets deleted, so there's always 3 versions. This is everything I need if my little unraid NUC self-destructed and there was nothing left to it. I'll just buy another NUC, put the drives in, get unraid installed, and then restore my containers, and I'll be back up and running without really having to configure them. So if this makes sense to you, you're backed up multiple ways. If either server goes down, you point the unraid NUC running only Plex at the new or at the remaining NAS. If that unraid NUC goes down and self-destructs, you have everything you need to repair that. But here's the thing. This is even better. So each of my Synology NAS units are on separate CyberPower UPS devices. So this has a smaller one because that's all that's on it. And I have a few other things besides the DS1520 Plus installed on my main NAS, including the little unraid NUC. So through the power of nut, oh, wrong thing. Through the power of nut, I can take the UPS that's connected here and extend it to my unraid IP address. And then back in unraid, it's another app to install. Network UPS tools for unraid. This allows me to then access the IP address of my Synology NAS. So the Synology is set to shut down 3 or 4 minutes after power loss is detected with the NAS plugged into the battery side of the UPS. I've set unraid to do the same thing, so that shuts down also. And when power is restored, they both start back up. But what makes unraid especially nice is this will boot much faster than my Synology NAS, so there won't be any shared files to access. So I can delay the mounts in unraid in the settings very easily by, I delay it 3 or 4 minutes. And then I delay a sacrificial Docker container. Well, I don't delay that. That starts up immediately. It doesn't need any access to the Syno NAS, but it's sacrificial because I use it to set a timer. This 300 seconds means the next Docker container won't open for 300 seconds. Then the next one won't open for 5, and then 30, then 30, and then 10, and then 10 and 10, until finally the Plex server starts about 8 minutes after the boot of unraid. And someplace around, I don't know, the 5-minute mark, my Synology NAS, well, even sooner than that, someplace around the 3-4 minute mark, my Synology NAS is serving files. So this is a completely unattended setup if I lose power. And I have a second smaller UPS by CyberPower for my older NAS, because when one of my two older sons who still live in town live someplace with gig fiber internet, that backup NAS is going to live off-site with them. I have gig fiber here, but I want them to have that fast service too before the NAS goes to live with one of them, to be a true off-site backup. So let me just check Plex, make sure nobody started the stream. Oh, I opened up the player app. So there isn't a real update, but sometimes in unraid you'll see that there's a new version of the container that's not really new. Well, so to check for updates, you hit that button. It'll check all the containers. And unlike a Synology NAS and having to update in Portainer, Dockers are just so easy in unraid. So apply update. Yes, update it. And I don't know, I use the phrase stupidly easy when referring to unraid, but that's really from my perspective of knowing how to do Docker containers in a Synology NAS first and being used to how a Synology NAS worked with shared folders. I found unraid stupidly easy to set up in the unique way I'm using it. So Ben, that's my pitch to you. It involves another device, but you can point this container at either NAS in a few minutes of one going down. That part's not unattended though, but with a good UPS plugged into the USB port of your main NAS, you can extend that protection through NUT to this unraid setup, and you just don't have to be there if you lose power and it gets restored. Everything comes up the way it should. And the only thing you have to attend to is if you actually lose your Synology NAS. But brother, there's a lot less chance of that happening if it's plugged into a good UPS in the first place. It's great surge suppression, and there's no sudden shutdowns. There's no uncontrolled shutdowns. So I must be tired. I'm starting to slur my words. So that's my advice, Ben. Take it or leave it. But I don't think you'll find something that meets your needs as well as this idea. Anybody else watching? Happy plexing.